Welcome, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. First, please silence your phones if you have not done so already. My name is Ann Krieg. I've been a member here for almost 20 years and have enjoyed many opportunities for service and fun, from teaching religious education to volunteering at the soup kitchen and participating in a chalice circle. The Unitarian Congregation of Danbury has been gathering together for 200 years, and as we work to build a more just world, we respectfully acknowledge that our physical building is on the traditional land of the Paugussett people. I am so glad that you are able to join us this morning because you are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or 1,000th Sunday in our midst, in person or online, we are stronger because you are with us. If you're new to our community and joining us online, we invite you to introduce yourself and where you are connecting from in the chat box as you are comfortable. At the conclusion of today's service, you will have the chance to participate in a great breakout group for individual connections and deeper check-ins. I invite all of you to stay for coffee after the service. And if there were newcomers, I would invite you to sign a visitor card at the table near the exit before you leave. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome here. I'll call your attention to one announcement. It was on the screen preceding the service. This coming Thursday, the book Conversations group will meet, and we will be discussing Donut Economics, written by Kate Rayworth. Bob Bollinger is the moderator. Contact Marianne Kula if you plan to attend. Again, welcome to the UU Congregation of Danbury.
Good morning. Our minister, Reverend Dr. Kathleen Rudolph, is not with us today, but will be back on August 7th. Today, we're happy to have a message and other parts of the service recorded by Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, president of the UU, Unitarian Universalist Association. Let's now take a moment to greet one another by starting with those of us in Fellowship Hall, turning and waving to those online this morning. Hi, everybody. Please take a moment to greet those around you, and those of you online, please greet each other through the chat box. That was quick. Our opening words this morning are adapted from a piece by Erica Hewitt. As we enter into this hour, put away the pressures of the world that ask us to perform, to take up masks, to put on brave fronts. Silence the voices that ask you to be perfect. This is a community of compassion and welcoming. You do not have to do anything to earn the love contained within these walls. You do not have to be braver, smarter, stronger, better than you are in this moment to belong here with us. Bring all that you are and all that you love to this hour together. And now, please join in singing today's hymn of welcome, Come, Come, Whoever You Are.
I will play the melody once through for those of us who aren't familiar, and then we will sing it through twice. We're not going to do the 4-part round today. We need Jerry for that, I think. So here's the melody. sing twice. Come, come, whoever you are, wander, worshiper, lover of leafy horses, no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving horses, no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Please join me in reciting our chalice lighting affirmation. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another, and celebrate life. And now for the children's affirmation. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other.
Hi. So Sage. And Unitarian Universalism, we talk about how we are all connected. And when I say that all people in the world are connected, what do you think about that, or what does it bring up for you?
I think it brings up, like if everyone's connected, like on the ground, like how trees is touching, like if one tree's here and one tree's there.
Right. So even though we can't tell that the roots of trees are touching, they're still touching and they're still connected. And so that reminds you of how people are all connected.
Yeah.
And then what are some ways in which we are all connected? Can you give me like an example?
Like if we're best friends or family.
So best friends and families can be connected. Yeah. What about what I do can impact other people, right? So if I'm in a classroom and I sneeze, achoo, but I don't cover my nose or my mouth with my elbow, what can happen to my friends in the classroom?
They can get germs.
Yeah, they can get my germs. So even though I say, no, I'm okay, I don't need a tissue, I don't need to cover my mouth, what should I do?
You should cover your mouth even though you don't want to.
Right, because what I do can impact other people because we are all
Connected.
awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
So Bradshaw, in Unitarian Universalism, we often talk about this interconnected web in which we are all a part of. Can you kind of share with me your thoughts on the interconnectedness of all of us during this time in history?
Not only do I think that humanity is a thing that connects us together, I also think it's experiences and what we've been through.
So I always thought growing up that we were all connected, but I really felt like there was no way to share that or prove that. Like I felt like what I did impacted other people. And there were always those people who were like, the only thing that matters is what I do because I am the only person that it bothers. But then when we had COVID, that was a clear example that we are all connected because what I do impacts everyone else. So COVID started with one person, and now we saw this worldwide pandemic because people weren't washing their hands or wearing masks or social distancing or whatever you want to say they were or were not doing. But it clearly showed that we are connected, and what one of us does clearly impacts everyone else. So if I tear down a rainforest in some tropical location, it will impact people on the other side of the world. So what we do does matter, like not just for us, but for those outside of our sphere. So Bradshaw, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's true, but in the instance that you brought up with the trees being cut down, I think not only that connects us humans, but also us creatures of Earth, as that will affect the animals in the ecosystem.
Oh, that's really good. I was only thinking of it as in terms of mankind, but I guess the interconnected web in which we are all a part also applies to um, animals and trees and whatnot.
Sing it with me. Spirit of love, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Oh, in the wind, rise in the sea, move in life, giving life the shape of justice. Oh, me, wings that free, Spirit of love, come to me, come to me.
When covenant breaks, hope flickers, and doubt seeps in like floodwaters through the cracks in the basement. While the many return to the comforts of their congregation, we are left staring at the door that was slammed in our faces, wondering if we should walk back in and why. Our faith demands growth, demands inclusion of those who were never like us, whatever side of that us you fall on. But words can so easily be cast aside in the moment when they matter. Covenant is a promise that we will work together on a team we didn't choose, doing group work we like the idea of far more than the thing itself. It is the radical answer to a radical goal, at least on paper. For our faith does not give us answers for what to do when covenant breaks. When we see that some would rather cling to their patriarchy and their white supremacy, would make problem people of the whistleblowers and hateful radicals of those just asking for rights. Would pretend that the promises of covenant mean nothing unless the person is just like you. But then, standing in that cold with that door slammed in front of you, something shifts. Covenant is a promise between the people of this faith. But it is also a promise between ourself and our faith. And sometimes nothing takes more faith than staying. Choosing to speak of your broken heart to those who are brave enough to face change. To stay in dialogue and have those hard conversations you never wanted to have. And choosing to be angry rather than walk away. All of these are holding true to your promises. When covenant breaks, we are sent back to the beginning again, like a toddler on their time out to think about what just happened, or a minister on their sabbatical called to remember what we fell in love with in the first place. This ship is not sinking. It is only rocked by the violent waves of oppression, and everyone has contributed to the oppression of someone, if not everyone. May that humility keep us listening even when our own pain hasn't been heard yet. Even when our relationships are shattering like crystals falling to cold stone, even when all you need is a hug and your community won't open its arms yet. When covenant breaks, we need to come home to trust. To trust that there are others out there who would have supported you if they were only there. And to trust that our faith will always be here tomorrow, bound by nothing more or less than the promises made by people willing to fight. Like a golden web glimmering with dew in the first light of morning, because when covenant breaks, it is a tear merely in a web still holding strong. And as long as we believe in ourselves and in the greatness that we could become together, then we can always come back tomorrow, roll up our sleeves, and start weaving again.
It is now time for our congregational offering. If you are with us for the first time, your presence is your gift to us. Members and friends online, please express your generosity by using the link or QR code found on the screen or in the chat. If you prefer, you may send a check to UUCD at 24 Clapboard Ridge Road, Danbury. Thank you for doing your part to support and sustain this community we love.
We're all connected, bird, cloud, and tree. We're all connected, earth, wind, and sea. Woven in a single garment of destiny. We're all connected, breath, you and me. We're all connected, bird, cloud, and tree. We're all connected, bird, cloud, and tree. We're all connected, earth, wind, and sea. We're all connected, earth, wind, and sea. Woven in a single garment of destiny. Woven in a single garment of destiny. Connected, breath, you and me. We're all connected, breath, you and me. We're all connected. We're all connected. Bird, cloud, and tree. Bird, cloud, and tree. We're all connected. We're all connected. Earth, wind, and sea. Earth, wind, and sea. Woven in a single garment of destiny. We're all connected. We're all connected. Breath, you and me. Breath, you and me. We're all connected. We're all connected. Bird, cloud, and tree. Bird, cloud, and tree. We're all connected. We're all connected. Earth, wind, and sea. Earth, wind, and sea. Woven in a single garment of destiny. We're all connected. We're all
A beautiful quilt hangs on the wall in my home office, where I now spend so much of my time, including taping many of my recordings. It was made by Unitarian Universalist Jennifer Centric, then a member of the First UU Church of Youngstown, Ohio, where I served as minister. I hung it up early in the pandemic when I realized that little office would be the place where I would spend most of my days. The quilt brings me joy. The cacophony of rainbow colors signify welcome and inclusion. Each triangle brings its own bright beauty, a celebration of the individuality of each person. And there's a whimsical line of stitching that runs throughout and along the quilt's border, bringing a feeling of playfulness and the joy that is present in belonging. As a whole, the quilt reminds me of how we are all stitched together, an expression of our fundamental interdependence. If there's one thing the last 2 years of pandemic have taught us, it's the reality of our inescapable interconnectedness. Experiencing wave after wave of COVID-19 spreading quickly across the globe reminds us that our lives are inextricably woven together. Early in the pandemic, we learned to wear masks, understanding that I wear my mask to protect you, and you wear your mask to protect me. We rely on one another, and we can act to protect one another, or our actions can put each other at more risk. As Unitarian Universalists, we have long articulated the importance of interdependence. We name it in our principles. We know it from our understanding of science and biology, and we understand it as Universalists who reject ideologies of supremacy rooted in notions of the saved and the damned, instead embracing the worth and dignity of every person and the knowledge that no one is outside the circle of love. We know we belong to each other, and we belong to the earth and the web of creation itself. So what does this reality of our interdependence mean for our theology? Well, it's reflected in one of the ways we describe Unitarian Universalism. We say we are not a creedal tradition, but a covenantal one. We don't have a creed which all must profess. We don't all believe the same things about the nature of God or gods, or even share the same religious background. But what does bind us? The promises we make to one another about how we will live together in community and how we will live together in our larger world. You see, as Unitarian Universalists, a far more important question than what do you believe is how are we to live? And we answer this question through covenant. Covenant is our religious response to our fundamental interdependence. Because we are interconnected, because we belong to each other, our religious and moral impulse guides us to make promises to nurture the threads of our connection with justice and compassion and equity. Now, early formulations of covenant were understood as among believers with their God. But over the centuries, the influence of Unitarianism, Universalist theology, along with humanism, have reoriented our notions of covenant to be rooted in our relationships with one another, our wider humanity, and creation itself. We are a tradition concerned with the here and now and the conditions of people's lives today. One powerful example of this is how our principles are articulated as a covenant. We covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We covenant to create practices that nurture justice and abiding compassion into the fabric of human relations. We covenant to join our efforts to work for a world where the web of life is infused with peace, justice, and equity, such that all people can thrive in their wholeness. The Universalists called this aspiration the kingdom of God. Today, we call it the beloved community. Covenant is a centerpiece of our theology because it calls us to practice and live our deepest values and the greatest aspirations we have for ourselves, humanity, and our world. Now, it's not about checking boxes and getting everything right. It's deeply spiritual work. It requires humility, listening, forgiveness, and open-heartedness. Because we are human, we don't live our promises perfectly. But covenant teaches us how to seek forgiveness from one another and ourselves, and it teaches us how to heal and come back together. Covenants are life affirming and life saving because the truth is we need each other. We hold each other's well being in our hands and in our actions. And this is not a burden, but an incomparable gift. It's why we love. It's why we create enduring friendships. It's why someone's art can stir another's heart. It's why we gather in religious community and are deeply held and changed by its presence in our lives. Just like that quilt that hangs in my office, our UU principles reflect our fundamental interdependence and the role that covenant plays as a North Star, a guide for how we live and our commitments. This we know, we belong to each other. In 1963, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. articulated this truth from a narrow cell in Birmingham, Alabama. In his now famous Letter from a Birmingham Jail, King shared his sense of disappointment with white, moderate clergy who condemned the tactics of nonviolent direct action to confront the racist police violence, segregation, and Jim Crow laws of Birmingham. In that letter, King called us all to a deeper knowing of our interdependence, writing, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." King offered this soaring image along the backdrop of lament, frustration, and disappointment at the clergy who preach the values of equality, but in the moment of need and opportunity for real and material change in the lives of Black Americans, condemned King. I imagine on a personal level that all of us know this feeling of disappointment and anger at being let down by those who you thought were with you and would show up alongside you in your moment of need. It's painful. And right now, we are all experiencing layers of this deep personal, social, and collective lament. As a religious community, we know these things to be true, that no one is outside the circle of love, that every person has worth and dignity, that love and compassion are the foundation for the world we need. We know this, and yet everywhere we see these values forsaken. For decades, we have witnessed the erosion of bonds of care, compassion, and shared investment in community. In just the 46 years of my lifetime, we've witnessed devastating rise of inequality, poverty, and indebtedness in the US. Alongside this has been the escalation of policing and mass incarceration and the criminalization of poverty. For more than a decade, we've witnessed the explicit political embrace on the right of dehumanizing and divisive rhetoric and policy rooted in racism, xenophobia, patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. For years, we've experienced the growth of propaganda and disinformation. And now we are living with the direct impacts of this rhetorical and policy violence in the banning of books and the silencing of history, in the suppression of voting rights, in the caging of children, and in the vigilante violence and growing support of an authoritarian, anti-democratic, white supremacist movement in the United States. And it is against this backdrop in the US that the COVID-19 pandemic began. And repeatedly, we have lost ground as we've responded to this virus through individualism, capitalism, and nationalism. Whether it is the refusal to wear masks out of some distorted notion of individual freedom, or locking down borders in ways that betray racist assumptions, to treating essential workers as expendable, to failing repeatedly to put global vaccination ahead of profits. We continue to fail in our responsibilities to each other. We live in a web of interdependence, whether or not we wish it so. And suffering thrives where the bonds of our relationships are defined by exploitation and domination. In the US, the coronavirus has thrived along historic and systemic fissures of disparity and racism and poverty. Fissures that have long defiled our social bonds. The impacts of these choices is that this virus has taken nearly 1 million lives in the US and caused so much isolation, despair, and trauma for all of us, but especially for those who are already impacted by systemic inequity and oppression. The layers of trauma, the layers of lament are deep. And in our own UU community, we've seen this disparity. We have lost so many young Black leaders, not just to the pandemic, but to the stress of these times. The deep lament is because the crisis of this pandemic, alongside the crisis of global climate change, of which the two are not unrelated, actually creates the necessity and the opportunity to draw humanity together for collective action to save lives and protect the future of our species. But again and again, we've chosen to double down on division, nationalism, profits, and a deadly status quo. Now, to be clear, I'm not pointing back to some golden day that never was. What we need is to chart a new way forward, rooted in covenant, rooted in an understanding of our fundamental belonging and our responsibilities to one another. King understood this when he reminded us that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. It is why it is so important to understand that the crises we face today are not just economic or political or social or even environmental. They are fundamentally spiritual and moral crises, reflective of the ways that the threads of connection that bind us have been defiled by greed and exploitation. And the tools we need to reweave these bonds are compassion, deep solidarity, mutuality, and care. These are defining times. It matters that we root ourselves in deep care for one another and a courageous commitment to the struggle for justice and thriving for everyone and for our shared future. After all, our religious communities are not social clubs. Our theology, our commitment to covenant is not an intellectual exercise. It is a call to a way of living and being. It is a call to action. This is no time for a casual faith, no time for a casual commitment to one another and the values of human dignity, justice, and compassion that we hold dear. And this is no time to go it alone. Practicing covenant reminds us that it is an act of faithfulness to continue showing up for and with one another. It is an act of faithfulness to continue to center care in how we live in the midst of division. This is a time where we need greater courage and greater solidarity and a deeper commitment to the well-being of all people and all communities. We need investments that address poverty, climate change, and that invest in democracy and in human flourishing. Whenever I hear King's words, that we are tied in a single garment of destiny, I imagine humanity as a collection of brilliant stars held together across the fabric of the expansive night sky, holding promise for what can be when we understand that we belong to each other and that we share responsibility for one another. I also remember our own Universalist forebears who believed in universal salvation, but also knew that hell was something that existed here in this life, fostered by systemic injustice. And our work as a people of faith is to love the hell out of this world, to join our efforts to work for a world where the web of life is infused with care, with peace, with justice, with compassion and equity, such that all people can thrive in their wholeness. May it be so.
May it be so. Wow. It's now time to extinguish the chalice. Please join me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Mientras late el corazón, debo decir sí al amor. Me dolió la decepción y aún así te di el perdón. Si preguntan qué hice bien, diles dijo sí al amor. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
We are not alone, though sometimes we forget that truth.
We are woven into one cloth, one gorgeous blanket, designed for use, for comfort, to sustain, and to love.
And each and every day, this world advertises the potential of our shared beauty.
It is there for the taking, for the making, for the weaving.
In this moment, here together, we remember that we are the woven and also the weavers.
Each of us rooted in generations and stretching towards the future.
Held by communities and beholden to them.
Seeking wholeness and sought by life's desire for itself.
Loving the world and beloved so much more than we realize.
Part of the web of the beautiful blanket of creation.
Together